Welcome to America's Commercial Real Estate Show, your source for market intel, forecasts, and strategies. Hello, I'm Michael Bull. Thank you for being with us. This segment is brought to you by CommercialAgentSuccess.com. Check it out. It's the ultimate in training for commercial agents, and you can find it, guess where? CommercialAgentSuccess.com. Well, today we're going to talk about the hospitality industry, the hotels around the country, and as everyone knows, a lot of the hotels have had a really serious time through COVID. Well, here we are getting into the final stages of 2021, right? It's almost the end of the summer, and let's take a look at what's happening with hotels. Can hotel industry, can they get financing? Are there any hotels selling? How are hotels performing? What's the future? We hear a lot about adaptive reuse. What's going on there? Well, we've tapped an expert for you. Please welcome my guest. It's Daniel Lesser. He's president and CEO of LW Hospitality Advisors. Daniel, good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. Great to be here.
Well, Daniel, you've done a lot in the hotel industry throughout your career, and currently you're doing asset management, you're doing receivership, you're doing market studies and consulting and advisory, and even have predictive analytics that you do that sound amazing to understand what's going on in the hotel industry. And I think the first question my audience is curious about is, we hear, most of us hear, that the hotels where people are going to vacation and get out of their homes finally are doing okay, at least U.S. based. How about vacation-oriented hotel-oriented properties around the world? How are they doing? And then from there, how are other hotels doing? I guess the convention hotels are still suffering, right?
Well, clearly, drive-to leisure-oriented properties, not just in the United States but around the world, are doing exceptionally well right now during the summer season, at least in the northern hemisphere. And yes, you're absolutely right that downtown urban core, and particularly big box, large convention hotels, they have and continue to be challenged. The big question right now is post Labor Day. What is the business and group meeting and convention traffic going to look like? And for a couple of weeks it was looking pretty good until the Delta variant bubbled up, and now we see that a lot of companies are pulling back on their demands for coming back to the office. Trade shows have been canceled. In New York, the automobile show was canceled. So it was looking good for a period of time, and now it's looking a little cloudy again. So there is some concern about the near term.
Yeah, well, that's terrible. You hate to see this Delta variant building steam and hurting really the world and business around the world. So the hotel market today, how are these properties? So these properties that drive to hotels and things, leisure hotels, so they just kicking it? Are they back partying like it's 2019?
Some are actually doing better than 2019, believe it or not. So yeah, the demand is generally there. There are all sorts of operational challenges in terms of labor shortages. I probably don't need to talk too much about that because every industry is experiencing labor shortages, and the hotel industry is feeling it acutely right now. The Amazon effect, we've heard a lot of talk about that. Working in a hotel is not an easy proposition. It's challenging, and the pandemic has sort of evolved such that better opportunities have come up, and line workers within the sector have moved on to other industries. And so that's been a real challenge. And I will tell you that I'm involved in some hotels where the demand is there to make available 100% of the room inventory, but there are just not enough people to clean the rooms. I mean, we have general managers, directors of sales, what have you, stepping up and cleaning rooms but it's not enough. And so if you think about it, here we coming out of this tremendous downturn, the demand has come roaring back for some assets, and yet because of labor constraints, there's an inability to take advantage of that full demand, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, and kind of a crazy situation. It seems like they don't want tenants to have to pay rent, but it seems like everyone that wants a job has a job or could get a job. Kind of crazy. What about hotel sales? I know a lot of groups were thinking that this was going to be a great opportunity to maybe acquire some assets in a down market. What have you seen?
So that is a very interesting point. And yes, an awful lot of money was raised in anticipation of what was perceived as going to be one of the greatest buying opportunities ever in the lodging sector. And that just did not happen. At the end of the day, lenders, for the most part, have been, the infamous kicking the can down the road has definitely been a phenomenon that's been going on in the sector. And so, there are a lot of troubled assets in terms of, paying debt service. However, forbearance programs have definitely, forestalled any, significant amounts of foreclosures. We are actually seeing quite a bit of sales activity now. During the bottom of the pandemic, sales activity just came to a screeching halt. There was no financing. But when you look quarter over quarter, when you compare Q2 2020 and every quarter thereafter, the number of trades and the volume of trades has increased dramatically. And frankly, values have rebounded as well. So there's a lot of capital out there, and for compelling opportunities, it's interesting. There's so much money out there that for compelling opportunities that have a good story behind them, these distressed deals are actually getting bid up. The pricing is getting bid up. So we're seeing distress-related transactions, but don't necessarily reflect distressed pricing.
Yeah, that's crazy. Hey, we're talking with Daniel Lesser. He's president and CEO of LW Hospitality Advisors about the hotel market. And you mentioned that, for a while when this pandemic started, financing really wasn't available. What do you see now?
Financing is definitely available, even CMBS financing, which is, again, quite a remarkable turnaround. I would say for the most part, it's acquisition financing and to some degree refinancing funds as well. New construction is a challenge. Obviously, if somebody is interested in developing a hotel, it better be a couple of years in the future, because right now it's pretty difficult to find something to put a shovel in the ground in terms of capital backing. But if you think about it, for existing owners, that's actually a pretty good thing.
Yeah. Well, how are franchisors doing right now, Daniel? Did they suffer through this pandemic at all?
Absolutely. There's a notion among some that franchisors tend to work off of percentage of gross, which is true. But the reality is, if there's no gross, there are no fees, right? So. The hotel companies are right in there with the owners in terms of taking it on the chin when there is no business. And again, we're seeing a really nice rebound because, let's face it, traveling is part of human nature, right? And we're seeing that people want to travel, people need to travel, and it's not going to go away. Lots of folks talk about paradigm shifts, the new normal. Sure, maybe there may be some things that become new normal, right? Like this, for example, which is kind of interesting, right? The whole notion of video conferencing, which is interesting in that video conferencing has actually been around for a long time, right? FaceTime was around for probably 10 years before the pandemic, and yet now Zoom has become a commonly used term. and the notion of utilizing video conferencing, has finally taken hold. Is that going to go away? Probably not, right? But there's nothing like face-to-face meetings, right? You can look at my eyes, I can see your eyes, right? But you can't look into my eyes on video conferencing. And there's nothing like that human connectivity, and that's not going to go away.
Yeah, because if we were together, I could see into your eyes, into your soul, and really know about you. Let's look at the future of the hotel industry. I guess it's really hard to you're an asset manager, you're a consultant. When somebody asks you today, hey, Daniel, I'm thinking about buying this convention hotel in New York. When's it going to come back?
If I had the answer to that question, I'd be buying that property. Listen, the reality is that nobody knows, right? I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I know, right? Nobody could have predicted the pandemic, right? Nobody would have predicted the Delta variant. Who knows what's going to come after this, right? Is coronavirus something that's going to morph into a disease that just doesn't go away and becomes like influenza? I'm not a doctor. I have no idea. But listen, again, coming back to the notion of meeting in person, I frankly think I tend to be a contrarian when it comes to investment. And I think actually now is the right time to be seeking out big box convention-oriented hotels in downtown urban cores. Now, the key is investors in the hotel space. Hotels are fundamentally long-term holds. They always have been, and frankly, probably always will be. Investors that underwrite with the presumption of a 3 to 5 year hold could be playing with a little bit of fire, right? Think about anybody who closed on a deal in January 2020, right? If they underwrote assuming a 3 to 5 year hold, that's going to be a very dicey proposition in terms of hoping to just get your principal back, right? But if you underwrite for and are ready, willing, and able to hold for a 10-year period at a minimum, you're probably going to be okay and probably going to make some money too, right? Now that doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to hold for 10 years, right? If an event to bake in some gains becomes available, you're going to take advantage of it, right? In year 1, 2, or 3, right? But again, you need to be willing and ready to hold on for a long period of time if need be. And all of this dials back to the fundamental premise of how hotels are very different than other commercial real estate asset classes, in that you're leasing guest rooms every single day, and the pricing of those rooms changes by the nanosecond, which in an up market, that's a terrific thing, right? In a down market, as we just experienced, it could be very, very challenging.
Yeah, it changes pretty quickly, doesn't it? Well, Daniel, with your experience, I can't let you go until you provide some tips for operators today. As you mentioned, that some of them are having kind of similar problems, right, with labor, and what are some of the other problems, and what are some tips you would provide for operators?
Well, clearly labor is an issue. Property taxes are also a big issue. If you think about it, it is kind of interesting. I have, on the valuation side, lots of folks trying to convince me that, when values went down during COVID, property taxes theoretically should go down. But unfortunately, that's not the way it works, right? If you think about it, most municipalities in America are not all that solvent, and while somebody may be entitled to a reduction in assessed value, right? If you think about how tax burdens are determined, they take a budget and they take the total assessed value and back into the tax rate. So while you may be entitled to a reduction of assessment, invariably you're going to probably end up paying more tax burden due to a declining value. So property taxes are a huge issue. Insurance costs are a big issue. they're not going down anytime soon. And then, we talked about shortage of labor, but in a fair number of downtown urban cores like New York, San Francisco, unions have also become quite a big challenge, and dealing with their agreements, if you will. So there are a lot of challenges out there in terms of advice and tidbits. I would say, listen, everything is predicated upon what's your basis in a deal, right? And right now there are some compelling opportunities to acquire hotel assets at way below replacement cost, right? I can think of a trade or two in New York within the past year at $250,000 a room, which is multiples below replacement cost, and folks commenting that they thought that was still a big number at $250 a room. And it may have been, but over a 10-year period, I'd like to think that that's not going to be the case, and that looking back 10 years from now, $250 a room in New York is actually going to be a pretty good deal.
Yeah, that's what the buyers are really looking for, right? So as far as strategies, so appeal your assessment. I guess it doesn't hurt to appeal it. Shop insurance. When it comes to the labor issue, you mentioned some of the more executive positions in hotels, even some of the owners themselves are cleaning rooms. Any other tips related to labor? How are people dealing with it except for not renting rooms?
I mean, like I said, the way a lot of them are dealing with it is they're not able to reopen their inventory in full, right? Which is not necessarily a solution, right? Because you're leaving money on the table by doing that. Yeah. Intuitively, one can say to raise wage rates to be more competitive with the Amazons of the world, but that doesn't exactly help your bottom line. Some folks think that this whole labor issue is transitory, and that once government benefits end, finally, that people will be going back to work. Time will tell. But in the meantime, listen, in the hotel industry, the repricing of guest rooms, like I said earlier, is a beautiful thing, right? And supply and demand, kicks in very quickly. So there are tremendous opportunities to make up for enhanced labor expenses, frankly, by charging more.
Yeah, and where you can get it. I know I've stayed in a few cities recently that really had a lack of supply, and it was quite expensive, more expensive than I thought. Then you add a rental car, and I was like, whoa.
That's if you can get a rental car.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Daniel, what would you leave our audience to think about related to the future ahead of us in the hospitality world?
I'm an optimist at heart. Frankly, if you're in the hotel hospitality business, negativity doesn't really take you too far. So I really believe that brighter days are ahead. It's probably going to take some time. That's the good news. The bad news is, let's face it, when you look back over, at least when I look back over my lifetime, right, the first sort of major crisis that I recall that the world experienced during my lifetime was the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. Now I'm giving my age away. But if I look back just since then, there have been several notable calamities, if you will, where these were oh my God moments. The world's about to end. Whether it be 9/11, whether it be the Gulf War, whether it be the stock market crashes. Again, if you go back in time, there's no shortage of events to look to. But every time we seem to come back bigger and better, right? 9/11, New York was done, right? Lower Manhattan was done, right? And look at what happened, very shortly thereafter. So I'm very optimistic. I think the key, again, is being very focused on your basis, right? What you're getting into a deal at, and being ready, willing, and able to hold for a long period of time. Again, doesn't mean that you have to hold that long, but if need be, you are able to.
Okay. And how about the folks who are maybe in distress and they've gotten some forbearance from the lender, they're getting to the end of it? What would be 3 tips for an owner operator who is in forbearance, can't pay their payments? What are some tips for those folks?
Call Michael Bull or me.
We'll sell it or do something.
Yeah, I mean, listen, let's face it. You know, a lot of folks who are sort of in the thick of it and don't know really, you know, what to do. They need professional advice, and so you know, we're working with a whole slew of folks who, you know, helping them figure out, like, you know, frankly, okay, what is my next move, right? Do I hand the keys back? Do I declare bankruptcy? You know, there is capital out there. There's no shortage of rescue capital, right? And figuring out, okay, well, how do I embrace that rescue capital and hopefully not get wiped out by it? So there are lots of alternatives and opportunities, and obviously that's all changing as time is going on. But I would definitely seek professional assistance, you know, from folks who are out there in the market and dealing with this day in and day out. And there's no shortage of owners that are sort of very focused on their own asset or assets and don't necessarily, are not necessarily exposed to the bigger picture.
Right, and if you're running your operations, you're not experienced perhaps at dealing with the different types of lenders, and it really depends on the different types of lenders you're dealing with and what their situation is, right, of how you should manage that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Daniel, thanks for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
Great to see you.
Thank you. And if you'd like more from Daniel, their website is lwhospitalityadvisors.com, and we'll put a link to their information at creshow.com. And also, while you're there, you can find other shows to watch or to listen. You can also subscribe to our weekly show email announcing the show topic and the guest. So till next week, be sure that you always lead, learn, and laugh, and join us for America's Commercial Real Estate Show. America's Commercial Real Estate Show is brought to you by Buxton. Take leasing, site selection, and due diligence to the next level. Make the right decisions with on-demand mobile data. Visit buxtonco.com. By Bull Realty. For proven commercial real estate asset and occupancy solutions, contact me. My email is michael@bullrealty.com. By Commercial Agent Success. Expert level commercial real estate broker training. Cloud Access 1 up to 21 one-hour videos. Visit commercialagentsuccess.com. Thank you for reviewing, subscribing, and sharing America's Commercial Real Estate Show.